Hello, everyone. Great to have you here for this week's Prezi Like a Pro Power Session. If this is your first time joining one of our power sessions, just a little bit of context around what these sessions are. This is a weekly series that I host with my fellow trainers. And the idea here is that we want to teach you tips to help you create better content faster. So every week, we're going to focus on a concept or a feature within Prezi that helps you level up your Prezi content creation skills. So this week, we are talking about creating a big reveal in Prezi Present. And if you're not sure what that means, don't worry. We're going to go through lots of examples today. But every session, we do about 30 minutes or so of a demo, and then we'll get into the editor. We're going to show you behind the scenes how to actually create some things. And then the 30-minute session is followed by an additional 15-minute Q&A that's kind of just open for whatever questions that you have. So should start by introducing myself also. For those of you who have not met, my name is Kim. I'm part of the training team here at Prezi. So I'll be taking us through our 30-minute demo today. So let's get into it here. What is a big reveal? A big reveal is like a visual punchline for your presentation. And it helps you to kind of shift your audience's perspective on your content and help them see it from a different way. So if you think about the way a PowerPoint or a slide-based presentation flows, it's very linear in structure, and you kind of go slide 1, slide 2, slide 3, viewing things in sequence, but maybe not necessarily in a big picture context. A big reveal helps you go from a small detail into a bigger picture and helps to shift your audience perspective on what they think is happening in your presentation to a different message, and kind of helps you tap into some different emotions with your audience, maybe intrigue, humor, the element of surprise. Then it helps keep your audience focused on your message. So let's take a look here. Now we're diving pretty deep into our presentation here to take a look at this example. But this is a very simple example of what a big reveal could look like. So the idea here is that we're starting in with one single message. And then as I click through my presentation, we're shifting out a little bit and we're revealing additional details or additional content. Okay? As we continue to move out, you're seeing more and more of the big picture of the presentation here. And we can do a subtle shift, or we can do a really big shift. Right? So obviously, this is a little bit more of a humorous example. But what I want to point out here is that using Prezi's open canvas zooming format, the entire example that we looked at is actually built into this little frame here. So this is not just a picture of the example that we are looking at. This is actually where all those zoom areas are built. And if you look at this tiny, tiny little globe here, we've got a teeny tiny little zoom area here that helped create that big reveal effect. So I'm going to show you how this was built in just a moment, and then we'll take a look at some additional examples as well. All right, so the easiest way to figure out what a big reveal is and how to create one is to actually take a look in the editor. So I'm going to switch to a screen share, and we're going to go behind the scenes into Prezi Present and learn how to create a few different examples. So let me share my screen, and a couple things as I'm doing that here. First, I always need to do a little housekeeping for myself and move some of my Zoom controls around. Also, on my other monitor, that's where I'm going to have my chat and my Q&A open. You are welcome to put in questions at any time throughout this session. So as we're looking at any of our examples, if you have a question about anything that we're looking at, any of the features, how to do something, please feel free to put that into the chat or the Q&A. I'll be keeping an eye on both. And I am just going to move all these over here to my other monitor, and then let me also grab our training window. Okay. So to start off with, we are going to just take a look at that example that I showed a moment ago. Okay. And where we're starting off, let me actually put this into our full screen here. Starting off just in the one detail, right? And then I'm just right-clicking to pull out to the other areas of content, right? So how is this actually built? Let's hit escape, and we'll get back into our present mode. And let's close out of our little survey here. So this is the presentation example that we were just looking at. So the way that a big reveal is built, basically you're starting by building out the big picture that you want your audience to see. even if that's not going to be the first point that you want them to see when you actually go into presentation mode. So here we started off with our picture of the galaxy. Okay, we built out that overview. And then once we built out that overview, which is simply a collection of the background image and then a couple stickers and an icon here. Once we built out that overview image, that's when we started layering in some of our zoom areas. So if I zoom in super close on our planet here, let's just pan in a little bit here, you'll see that we have some really small zoom areas starting off. We started with this tiny little detail here, and we can use our timeline to navigate as well. This is our first zoom area that we built in, our second. So we're basically just kind of like nesting those zoom areas, going from the smallest detail out. And you can think of adding in your zoom areas or your frames almost like pointing a camera around a scene that you've built. So kind of think of yourself almost like a movie director in that sense, right? You build out your overall scene that you want to show your audience, and then you're simply zooming in and out with your camera lens based on where you place those frames or your zoom areas. Also, you'll hear me use frames and zoom areas kind of interchangeably. They are the same thing. It's basically just the area of the canvas that you want to zoom to. So that's a basic idea of how these big reveals are structured, but let's take a look at actually building some of those out in a presentation. Not exactly from scratch, because we don't want to build a whole presentation here, but I want to show you how you can take a somewhat normal presentation or even one of our templates and actually build out that big reveal. So we are going to first take a look at this weekly meeting update here. And just to kind of show you how this is currently structured, I do want to point out that your timeline is going to be very important, not only for creating a big reveal, but in any presentation that you're building in Prezi, because your timeline shows you step by step what your audience is going to see. So we've got our overview, our first frame of content, second, third, so on and so forth. Okay. So let's pop this into preview mode right now. Actually, we'll just go into present mode and start the presentation from the beginning. Currently, if I were to present this as is, we're going to start at our overview here, right? So our big picture setting that we want our audience to see. And then as I right click, we're going to our first frame of content where we're covering our weekly meeting agenda. Moving over to the metrics that we want to share with our audience. Okay, back out to the overview before we go into our next area of content. So I could continue to present this just going in order right now from here's our agenda and then point 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, right? Very straightforward, works as is. But if I want to create a little bit more interest or surprise in my meeting to really capture my meeting attendees' interest, I'm going to go ahead and work on building out that big reveal. So as I'm looking at my content, the main thing that I want to portray to or convey to my audience is this idea right here under metrics. And this is where I'm starting off my presentation in terms of the actual content I'm giving them. I want to let them know that we saw a 12% increase in the US. Okay. Now, why is that important? Maybe, for example, this particular company, when it's giving this presentation, is sharing that they are seeing a lift in a particular market, and maybe last quarter, their numbers were not so great. So this is good news, and they want to share this with their audience. But 12% increase in the USA, it's fine. Not maybe particularly the most interesting way to convey this data. So let's actually zoom in a little bit here. And we're going to move in closer to this first bar here. This is where we're going to start our big reveal. And I want to share maybe a visual metaphor for the idea that, well, our numbers have grown pretty impressively in this market. And definitely a big change from where they were this time last year, let's say. So let's go ahead and first find a visual metaphor. And we're going to just start with a very simple one. A lot of times we'll see visual metaphor of maybe moving up a mountain, especially with business results, works pretty nicely. So we're going to go up to our media options here and go into image. And let's just search, we're going to search mountain. So what I'm looking for here as I'm searching through these, and you'll see why in just a moment here, I want to find a image of a mountain that has a really clear contrast between the foreground and the background. So this one might work here. Let's add a couple and see which one we like best. Okay, this one will also work. Okay, so what we want to do here is actually remove the background from these images. And I'm going to do that in order to blend it a little bit more seamlessly with the bar of the graph that I'm going to be working with here. So I'm just going to remove both of these backgrounds and let's see which one I think will work a little bit better in fitting with our content here. All right, now clearly this one kind of took out a little bit of the foreground as well, which will happen sometimes with the background removal AI. Doesn't always have an easy time reading the background and foreground, depending on how much contrast there is. But I'm going to also put an overlay here, and I want to match this color here. So I'm going to pick my scheme colors, which will help me match this quite well. And let's first try out this one here. Let's stretch it out to about the same size. And this one actually works pretty nicely because it has these square edges on it. I'm going to move it just about up here. And we'll go ahead and delete this one here. Okay, so this is where our results are moving to, right? We're moving up the mountain, reaching new heights for our results. So let's go ahead and add in also under our media options here. Let's go over to icon. And we're just going to put in flag. And this one will work pretty nicely. Let's change our fill color to maybe a brighter red. And we are just going to plant that flag right up here on our mountain peak. Okay. Now we're starting, actually, let's say underwater in our results, not doing so well. So the next thing we're going to do here is kind of do a similar thing with our underwater option. Let's go back to image. And let's try our keyword of underwater and see what comes up. And we'll try this one here. Now, same thing, I'm going to put in my overlay to match this kind of nicely with image. And I also think I need to crop a little bit out because it's quite long and tall. So let's crop out a little bit from the bottom, actually. We'll try that. So I want to just kind of fit this just about here. And if I'm zooming out just a little bit, let's move out. It's pretty obvious that I've got some kind of image there, right? We can kind of clearly see the delineation. So one more little stylistic thing that I want to do, I'm actually gonna put in a shape that will help blend this a little bit more. So let's go to our shapes and we'll just choose a square in this case. And what I'm gonna do is change this over in my fill color from a solid fill into a linear gradient. And I want the color that it fades from on the bottom to match here. We're going to max out some of our opacity here. Okay, and then the color that it fades to will also be this, but we're going to change over. And this will just help it blend a little bit better here. And maybe in our fill color, let's just add a little bit more opacity or transparency to the top there. And we'll drag this on up just about like that. All right, so you can see now this is blending a little bit better here with our overall image. But as I zoom in, I'm still getting just this like faint suggestion that we're underwater here. So this is where we're going to actually start our first frame with the idea that our numbers weren't so great. So let's go ahead and add in a frame here. And to add in a frame, you're just going to use your top property bar up here, where you find all your options to insert media. And we're just going to put it right over our bar. Okay. Now, notice that every time I add in a frame, that is added into my timeline here. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. But your timeline is also where you can just kind of double check and see how things are looking. If you want to hone in a little bit closer, you can use your timeline to also navigate through the content here. So let's go ahead and add in our main message here. And just making this up as I go here. And maybe we'll center this as well. So this is where we're actually going to start our presentation. So I'm going to actually, in my timeline, drag that up to the very first position in my timeline. Okay. Now I want to add in, as we move up into new results, I want to add in a new frame that shifts my audience perspective. And I'm going to copy and paste this. I want to move that right here. Okay. So when you're adding in your frames, pay close attention to where those frames add in your timeline, because you will have to adjust those to make sure everything is kind of in order. A lot of times things will sort of add in at the end of your timeline, especially if you're working with content that's already more fully built out in a template. A lot of typing skills here. Okay, so here we're going from our starting point here, zooming up a little bit more, and now we want to zoom out a little bit further. Okay, and let's add in the next part. Okay. And then we are going to move out just a little bit further here, right, to include this 12% increase in the US. So let's add a frame around that. And one thing that I do want to just mention about frames is that they are magnetic, meaning that when you are placing your frames and drawing them on your canvas, once you have those placed, if you rearrange them, notice that they carry all the content in that frame along with them. So one thing that you can do as you're building out your content, if it makes your editing easier, you can right click on your content. We'll just use this for example. You can right click on your content and lock it in place. And that means that as you move your magnetic frames, it's not going to capture that piece of content for you. So it helps when you're layering a lot of different elements like this, when you've got multiple images, text boxes, and things like graphs. Okay, so we've got all of our content built in here. There's one last thing that I need to do in order to create this as a big reveal. Because if I were to just go into my preview mode at the moment, I'm still just starting from the same place of our weekly meeting overview and then going into the weekly meeting agenda. So what I want to do next is I'm going to go over to my timeline. And instead of starting at the overview, I'm going to go to that frame that we moved up to the first area here. And we are going to set this as our custom starting point. You'll see a little map marker there that denotes this is the starting point of your presentation. And what that means is that rather than starting at the bird's eye overview, you're going to be starting in that frame that you've designated there. So now as I go into present mode, let's start our presentation. We're going to start here in that super teeny tiny frame that we just created. And as I right click, I'm moving through those pieces of content based on where I place that frame. Okay. Now, of course, you might go in and do a little bit more finessing with some of the design details here, but you can see how this is creating that zoom into the big picture here. Okay. And as I zoom out, I realize I forgot to move that frame that we added in here for the 12% of our metrics. There we go, because I actually wanted that to be here. So let's take another quick little look at that here. We'll just do preview here. So our sales results were down. The next quarter saw some promising results and it continued to grow until we had a 12% increase in the USA. Now let's pull out and take a look at our overall metrics. All right, so that is example number 1 of how you might create that big reveal into your overall presentation here. Let's take a look at also using a existing template here. So I am going to head back over to Prezi.com, our main dashboard here, and I'm going to click into create new presentation. This is going to take me into the Prezi Present template chooser. And one of the questions I frequently get is, do I need to start from scratch when I am building out a big reveal? And the answer is no. You've got all these amazing templates built out for you with some beautiful visuals, great structure. And the cool thing is that you can actually create a custom starting point from any of these. So as you're looking through your templates and finding a structure that you like, one that has a nice sort of overall setting or scene that you want for your content, any of these can have that big reveal moment built in. Now, not every presentation will need a big reveal, but it's nice to be able to do when you want to sort of grab your audience's attention. So let's take a look at another example here. And I'm going to use our sticky notes dark template here. I'm a fan of this one. But the reason I'm choosing this one for this particular example is just because it has sort of a nice scene set already for our desktop here. Now, as you're working with some of the templates, you might notice that particular templates already have that custom starting point set for you. And if you are working with a template that already has a custom starting point set for you and you like the way it is, great. But let's say that you don't and you want to change that. All you need to do to change that is go into your timeline here and find your map marker. And then you can remove the custom start point that's already built into the template and you can designate your own. Okay? Just keep in mind that wherever your custom starting point is, you'll want to move that up to the first area of your timeline. Because if I were to set, for instance, this frame as my custom starting point, it means I'll start the presentation here and then zoom out to here, but I'm not going to see any of these frames that come before that, right? So I'll always want to make sure that I'm rearranging my custom starting point to make sure that it's a first frame of content in my timeline and all the other content will flow from there. Okay, I do see a question came in about images. I will answer that in just a moment here when we get to the Q&A. So let's take a look at this example and then we'll get to all the questions. Okay, so right now, if I just go into present mode and start this presentation, we're starting here at the overview, and then we're zooming into our first frame, second frame, etc. We want to kind of flip the script a little bit and change our perspective on this overall image and where we're starting. So where I'm actually going to start here is right over here on our coffee cup. Let's zoom in there. And for the sake of our demo here, I'm just going to remove all the frames and content that's right here. I just want to be left with the coffee cup for the moment. So let's zoom in here. Let's add in a frame right over our coffee cup. And this can be where I can add in my first message here. Now, because this is going to be where we want to start our presentation, we're going to click, drag, drop it all the way up to the top of our timeline here. And let's set this as our starting point. And as we zoom out a little bit further, we can continue to build out text frame. We can continue to build out our frames to show the portion of our content that we want our audience to focus in on. And let's go ahead. We'll just add in the light bulb moment here. And again, we're going to move this back up in our timeline. So now as we're taking a look at our timeline here, here's our custom starting point. So if we follow in order, we're going to go from this frame here out a little bit further, but then notice it jumps all the way over to the other side of our canvas. We're not really getting that big reveal moment. So how do you do that? Well, you can of course add in an additional frame, kind of in a more of a larger frame around your overview. But the other easy way to do that is to say from this point here, we're going to go into our animation panel under your more actions here from your top toolbar. And then you're going to see the option to zoom out. This zoom out is basically going to add another zoom out to the overview. In other words, that bird's eye view, the big picture of your presentation. And it's going to add that into your timeline. Now, of course, again, I've said this multiple times, so it definitely bears repeating. Pay attention to where that falls in your timeline, because that will give you that step-by-step look at what your audience is going to see. So now we've got our custom starting point, our next slightly zoom out, and then our big reveal moment. So let's go ahead, we'll hit present, start our presentation, simple message, zooming out a little bit further, zooming out to the big reveal of the overall setting. And then we're going to go into the first area of content with our audience. Okay, so that brings us fast and furious to the end of our 30-minute overview and demo. So I hope that was helpful in kind of getting some ideas around how those big reveals might be built. Again, there's kind of endless options for the way you can structure these within the templates and where you're placing your frames around your content. So I encourage you to play around with that, especially looking through our template library, because there's tons of cool things you can do with all of our pre-existing and pre-designed templates. Now, I am going to open it up as promised for Q&A. And if you have questions that relate to some of the features that we took a look at today, that's awesome. Let me stop my share here, come back to the group. If you have questions that relate to some of the features or the concepts that we were looking at today, awesome. I'm happy to answer those, of course. But I always like to say that this time is really for you and to answer the questions that you have. So if you have unrelated questions, I'm happy to try and answer those during the session as well. If there's anything that we can't answer just from a content or a timing standpoint today, I am happy to follow up with you after our session and get you some more resources. All right, so first question that we had come in, let me find where my Q&A box went now that I've stopped my screen share here. There we go. All right, I face one issue while adding multiple images. At times they seem to get grouped together automatically and both images tend to move together. How do I resolve this? So without seeing the specific presentation that you're working on and the specific function, I'm guessing that it's because of either what's selected on your canvas, or if you are moving maybe a frame together. So let me just kind of show you something that will help here. And let's go back over to we'll use this one for the moment. So when I'm adding in multiple images, couple things that can happen. Anytime you add in an image, it should exist on its own as just a separate entity, right? So if we look at my taped piece of paper here in the corner, this is really just an image that's been added in to the presentation and exists on its own. However, if I draw a frame around it, or if I'm adding it into an area that already has an existing frame, anytime I move that frame, it's going to move the content along with it. So notice here, I've got a couple smaller images as well. In this case, they're sticky notes. But as I add in a frame around that, as I move this frame, it's going to carry all that content along with it. So when I am trying to adjust things, that's one thing that I would kind of take a look at. Am I moving something that has a frame around it? And maybe I'm just not noticing that I'm grabbing the frame instead of the image itself, because it can be kind of easy to do sometimes to accidentally grab that frame, especially if it's layered over the edge of a content like this. So I take a look at that. Now, when you are wanting to move content, but not move multiple items together, that's where that locking is going to come in super handy. So I will do this pretty early on, typically in my presentation builds. Anything that I know is going to be kind of a background feature in the overview or in a particular frame, and I don't want to move it as I'm adding in other elements, I'm going to lock that in place. Okay. So for instance, here, I would probably go in and I would lock things like the lamp, the laptop here, this, probably even my coffee cup. I'm going to lock all those pieces. And what that means is as I move the content around them, any of those things that I have locked in place are not going to be moved. So this is especially useful if I'm layering in additional images, graphs, text box icons, anything like that, that I want to kind of work with multiple layered elements. So let me know if that helps. If that does not seem to be relevant to the particular issue that you're describing, we have to follow up with you offline about that one so we can see the actual presentation or, screen grab of what you're looking at. All right, next question that came in, I believe was in my chat. Let me find my chat box here. There we go. Does zoom out option always get you back to the overview frame? Yes, that's correct. So in your animation panel, let's open that up here. So a couple things to know about your animation panel. If you don't have anything selected on your canvas, in other words, I haven't clicked on an image, a text box, anything like that. When I open up my animation panel, all I'm going to see is a zoom out. And the zoom out animation always takes you back out to that bird's eye view, as I always call it, of your overview, right? So this big picture of your presentation. Now, if I click on additional elements on my presentation, like a text box, an image, etc., I'm going to see some additional options pop into my animation pane that will be like your fade in, your fade out, zoom to. Now, these are more for specific elements. Your zoom out is always going to take you back out to that overview. All right, next question. Do you have to have premium version to do this? No, you can add in custom starting points and frames no matter your license level. Unless they've changed something, in which case I will follow up on that. But as of my last understanding of our features available to our license levels, that was not something that was behind a paywall. Let's see, next question. I remember a honeybee story example done with zoom out in the old Prezi. Is today's session the same as that? Overall, I find the new Prezi better to work with, but more control, but it's also more work. Great question. What we're doing today is the same concept as you would have seen in previous versions of Prezi. So for example, if you are working with our current version of Prezi, it's really based on frames, meaning that you're basically like setting different areas around your canvas to zoom in and out of. Now, in previous versions of Prezi, you'll see that we were a little bit more topic based. And let's go ahead and add in a topic here. Topics being kind of like mini file folders in your presentation where you can zoom in and reveal additional content. However, as you are adding in things like topics or subtopics, which I believe is how the presentation was built that you were referencing before, all of these work the same way in terms of setting a custom starting point. So I can set this subtopic, which is kind of like several layers deep in my presentation now. I could set this as my custom starting point, right? In which case, as I go into starting my presentation and clicking out, I'm zooming out of that topic. But in terms of the custom starting points, the frames and the topics are going to work in all the same ways. So let me know if that answers the question there. Keep an eye in case there's more context. Let's see, I don't like to use predefined themes. What more tutorials could I expect? So in other words, let me ask you this. For your question here, when you're referencing predefined themes, are you talking a little bit more about like you don't like to start from templates, you like to start from scratch and kind of build up a little bit more? If that's the case, let me know. And what I will do is send you a list of some tutorials to keep an eye out for on our training page. But if I misunderstood the question, okay, yeah, you don't like to use templates. Yep, so there are a few different sessions that we'll have available. And, you know, when you go to our training page, prezi.com/training, this is kind of a living, changing page, if you will, in that we always rotate out our sessions. There are some that you'll see are always kind of always on that are fundamentals or getting started, but then we'll switch out with different sessions too, different topics. So you'll see this updated and kind of different things added all the time. And as you scroll down, you'll see tons of different options and times available. So what I'll do is send you some topics or tutorials to keep an eye out for. And I'll also try and dig up some recordings that might help with kind of starting from scratch as well, because we do have a few different sessions that will address it in slightly different ways, but keep an eye out for that, and I'll send you some additional resources after our call. Yes, so a couple of requests for those. So I will actually send it to all of our attendees today, so you can all take a look at that. Absolutely. Okay, let's stop my share here and come back. Let me take a quick look here. So make sure I'm caught up here. Cool. All right, so I think I have caught up with our chat and our Q&A in terms of questions. We still have a few minutes left, so I know there might be some additional questions that are going to come in, so I'll hang out for those. In the meantime, I do want to just show you here our next session that we'll be talking about. So like I said, our Prezi Like a Pro Power sessions are weekly 30-minute sessions, and next week, there we go. Next week, my colleague Jules is going to be talking about transforming your Prezi Present content into a presentation for video. So this is actually one of the hot topics that we always get from our users, because with the zooming canvas in Prezi Present, you can not only present over a screen share or with full canvas in person, you can also turn it into a video presentation the way we're doing right now. So what she's going to cover is how to take your presentation from something that looks like this, and how do you optimize that using your frames and your content to make sure that if you want to go into a more video presentation for Zoom, WebEx, Microsoft Teams, how do you do that and kind of optimize your content in a way that makes room for you as presenter to appear alongside your content on your camera feed. And she's going to show you how to take an existing presentation, and rather than having to start all over from scratch, how do you take that existing presentation and turn it into something that you can use for video? So if you want to find out more, you can scan this QR code that will take you to the registration page. I will also, of course, send out the link to register for that along with the recording of this session. All right, another question that came in. Can you review the keyframes again, or is it too late? Never too late. Let's go ahead and take another look here. So when you say keyframes, let me know exactly what you mean by keyframes again, but I'll go over the feature again. while I'm waiting for just some additional context here in case I misunderstood the question. Okay, so let's go back over to our template chooser. And in this case, let's pick a different template to take a look at this time, just so we can take a look at a couple different examples. Okay. So I'm a big fan of this template. I think it's got a nice sort of scene that's set. And you'll see on your canvas here where the frames are already located. And in your timeline, you can see that you're going from the overview into first frame about us, zooming up to your next topic, etc. Okay. So let's pick a different area that we want this content to start. Now I can use any of the existing frames already in my timeline here. So if I wanted to start off with just about us, I could do that. Or if I wanted to start off maybe here, kind of super zoomed in. Okay, so we've got our content here. Now, this particular one is way down in our timeline. We want to zoom that on up, and we're going to set that as our starting point. Now, from there, I want to determine, okay, if this is the first frame that my audience is going to see right here, what do I want them to see next? Based on that, I'm going to pick out the frame that I want to be visible next in my content. So if I want to zoom over to about us, great. However, if I want to zoom out to the overview, that's what I'm going to add in the zoom out animation. Okay. So then I'll go back out to the overview. I might decide that I want to go in order of our animations here, in which case let's go ahead, or animations, illustrations. So let's pull all of these back up here. Okay, in which case here's my custom starting point. So now I know I'm going in order here, here, and then back out to the overview. Okay. And of course, if you are not wanting to use any of the existing frames built into a template, you can add in your own. And let's just, we'll put it over the clock over here. Okay. So I could also decide maybe this is where I want to start my presentation, in which case I'm going to set this as my starting point. Notice that will override the existing one in the presentation here. Okay, so let's just start this, starting in at the clock, zooming over. So at this point, we're just going in order of how we've rearranged things in our timeline. Now, one thing I will point out too, and this kind of relates back to the question of starting from scratch rather than using a template. When you go into create new presentation, you're going to see that there is a blank template option. Just called blank, and this might be in a different area. So for you, if you go into your template chooser, you might not see it as a very first option here, but you can always just search in the search bar and find blank. Okay, and select the appropriate one. If I click into a blank template, basically I'm still going to find some format options, but there's not a ton of design elements added in. So I'm just going to hit Command A or Control A if I'm on a Windows, it's Command A if you're on a Mac, and you can just delete everything off your canvas and really start from scratch. Okay. And the same is true for any of our other templates. Okay. You can select everything and you can delete it on off, except you might find some locked content in the background. Unlock that, and you'll also be able to delete any of that content off your canvas as well. Okay. So in that case, you're just going to be working with some of the preset design elements such as colors and maybe text styles, but you can get rid of all of the content here from the template itself. So that will work with any template, but the least designed one is going to be here under your blank, and you can remove all that, all the frame suggestions there. All right, so I know that brings us to probably about 60 seconds, maybe 120 seconds over our scheduled time here. I do have just a couple more minutes to hang out in case there are any additional questions. I do see a raised hand. Unfortunately, due to the way IT has configured my webinar settings, I'm not able to allow you to come off mute and ask your question, but I will hang out and keep an eye on the chat or the Q&A for you to send in your question and get that answered today. So for those of you who have to jump and ready to move on with the rest of your day, I just want to say thank you for being here. I hope you found this session helpful, and you will be receiving the recording along with any follow-up resources over the next 24 hours or so. That will come from Zoom, so keep an eye on your inbox for that, and hope to see you next week. One note on our sessions, if you ever find a session on our training page that you're interested in, but you just can't attend during the time that it's live, go ahead and register anyway, because we do send out the recording after the session so you can view on your own time. So you won't miss out that way, and you'll have the on-demand version that you can watch at your convenience. All right, let's see. For evaluating current projects, let me follow up with you offline and get a little bit more information on what you are looking for. And we will go from there. All right. I don't see any additional questions coming in at the moment, so just say thank you again for attending today. I hope you found this session helpful, and we hope to see you on some future weekly sessions. Have a wonderful rest of your week, and we'll chat soon. Bye, everyone.